The Stranger on the Stagecoach. The wind swept across the wide plains of Wyoming territory, rattling dry sagebrush and carrying the scent of distant rain. Eli Carter stood at the edge of the dusty main street, boots planted firm, eyes fixed on the approaching stagecoach. For weeks, he'd counted down the days, his heart clinging to the promise of a letter. That letter had been short, but enough, an introduction, a vow, and a hope. He was a man who rarely hoped. For 10 long years he had worked his ranch alone, the cattle and the land his only companions. Nights stretched long, and the silence inside his small cabin had weighed on him heavier than any fence post or branding iron. Loneliness was a hunger worse than any hunger of the body. So when his sister in Chicago had written to him about a mail-order bride agency, he had resisted at first. Yet winter nights had a way of wearing a man down. He had sent for a bride. A woman who, he believed, would be American-born, someone accustomed to this rough land. Someone to share bread with, to keep a lamp burning in the window. The stagecoach rolled to a stop with a groan of wheels and the clatter of horses. The driver climbed down, dusting his hat. A few passengers stepped out, a merchant, a traveling preacher, a woman with a child. Then Eli saw her. She stepped down slowly, clutching a small bundle wrapped in faded cloth. Her dark hair was coiled neatly, her eyes wide as they scanned the foreign street. She wore a plain blue dress that had seen better days, and though her shoulders were straight, there was an unmistakable uncertainty in her every step. The driver tipped his hat toward Eli. "This here's your bride, Mr. Carter." Eli blinked. "My bride." The woman bowed her head slightly, murmuring something in a soft, lilting tongue Eli didn't understand. Her words fell like water over stones, gentle, flowing, but impossible for him to grasp. A chill prickled down his spine. This wasn't what he'd expected. He had imagined a woman he could talk with, share thoughts with. Yet here she was, Chinese, and clearly not speaking a word of English. The townsfolk had already begun whispering. A rancher's wife was always a matter of gossip, and here was a story ready-made for their tongues. Eli's jaw tightened. He removed his hat. "Ma'am," he said, voice rough. "Name's Eli Carter." She tilted her head, eyes searching his face. Then, carefully, she placed her hand on her chest. "May." That single word, her name, was all he understood. The preacher cleared his throat. "Shall we proceed with the vows, Mr. Carter? You sent for a bride, did you not? The arrangements were made." Eli's chest tightened. Yes, he had sent for a bride. He had dreamed of this day. But never had he imagined standing before a stranger he could not even speak to. Still, as May stood there, small but unyielding, something inside him shifted. She had crossed oceans to be here. Whatever mistakes had been made in the arrangements, she had shown courage he could not deny. And so, under the broad Wyoming sky, with curious townsfolk watching and the preacher speaking solemn words, Eli Carter married May. The ride back to the ranch was quiet, save for the creak of the wagon and the distant cry of hawks. May sat beside him, hands folded tightly around her bundle. Eli kept stealing glances at her, torn between frustration and curiosity. When they reached the cabin, he helped her down. She looked at the small wooden house, the barn beyond, the endless fields rolling out like a sea of grass. Something flickered in her gaze. Fear, yes, but also determination. Inside, Eli lit a lamp. "It ain't much," he said gruffly. "But it's home." May set her bundle down. From it, she pulled a small embroidered cloth, its colors bright against the rough wood table. She smoothed it with careful fingers, transforming the cabin instantly. Then she looked up at him and smiled. It was a smile that reached her eyes, warm and unguarded. For the first time in years, Eli felt the weight of loneliness ease. Still, he knew the road ahead would not be simple. They had married in vows neither truly understood. They shared no common words. Yet as the prairie night deepened outside, Eli found himself thinking, maybe, just maybe, love didn't always begin with words, breaking barriers. The first weeks were awkward. Eli rose early, tending to the cattle, mending fences, working the land as always. May stayed near the cabin, cooking meals with surprising skill, though often with ingredients Eli had never thought to use in such ways. She gathered herbs from the prairie, made teas that soothed his aching muscles, and filled the air with scents that reminded him of something far away. But when he tried to speak with her, frustration gnawed at him. He would gesture toward tools, animals, places, trying to explain. She, in turn, would mimic, nod, or laugh softly when misunderstandings piled up. There were nights when Eli sat outside on the porch, staring at the stars, wondering if he'd made a mistake. One evening, a storm rolled across the plains. Rain hammered the roof, thunder shook the ground. As Eli worked to secure the barn door, he saw May standing at the threshold, hair damp, clutching a lantern. "Stay inside," he shouted. But she came to him, holding the light steady. Together they fought the wind, tying down ropes, driving cattle into shelter. By the time the storm passed, both were soaked through, mud clinging to their boots. Eli looked at her, hair plastered to her cheeks, eyes shining with stubborn resolve, and he laughed, a deep laugh that surprised him. May laughed too, though neither knew the other's words. In that moment, their laughter spoke more than language ever could. As summer deepened, small changes grew between them. May began teaching him words in her language, simple ones at first: water, food, sky. Eli repeated them clumsily, his accent making her giggle. In return, he taught her English words, pointing to objects, saying them slowly. One evening, as they shared bread by lamplight, she touched his arm and said haltingly, "Lee." His name, spoken carefully by her lips, stirred something in him he couldn't name. The town, however, was less kind. Whispers followed them whenever they rode in for supplies. Some muttered about foreigners, others questioned whether Eli had gone mad. A few men at the saloon laughed openly, making crude jokes. Eli ignored them, but one afternoon, as May waited outside the general store, a group of boys mocked her, pulling at their eyes, mimicking foreign sounds. Eli returned just in time. He grabbed the ringleader by the collar, fury burning in his chest. "You'll treat her with respect," he growled, voice low as thunder, "or you'll answer to me." The boys scattered. May looked at him, eyes wide, and for the first time she reached out, slipping her hand into his. No words, just trust. By harvest time, their bond had deepened. They worked side by side, sweat and laughter mingling beneath the wide skies. Eli discovered her strength, her patience, the quiet resilience she carried. May discovered his steadiness, his rough but gentle heart. One evening, as the sun sank in a blaze of gold, Eli found himself speaking aloud. "I thought I wanted a woman who spoke my tongue. But now, I reckon I just wanted someone who'd stand with me." May didn't understand the words, not fully. But she stepped closer, resting her head against his shoulder. And in that simple gesture, Eli understood something words could never say. Love had found them, not in letters, not in vows, not even in language, but in the courage to face each day together. The loner rancher and the stranger from across the sea. And in the wide silence of the prairie, their hearts finally spoke the same tongue.